So why have you come here from India to Climate Week New York?
Okay, so as a bank, we're the fifth largest private sector bank in India, Yes Bank. We believe that being climate action catalysts is extremely important, because banks are very central to an economy, and where you infuse your capital, you have to be very mindful and you have to be very tactful. So the reason for me to be here is that we have been engaging with governments in India as well as with the larger actors in this whole sustainable development goals, or the COP21 commitments that countries took, so with the United Nations. And we have been interacting with them. We have been actually involved with the United Nations Secretary General's report that was brought out in 2015, which was actually on sustainable finance, which went out to about 40 central bankers. So we believe that mobilizing finance for the SDGs and the COP21 commitments is extremely important. I mean, there's something like an aggregation of $172 trillion that is required, and banks have to really be on the forefront to be able to action the finance piece.
And what can you specifically do as a bank to get those funds flowing in line with the climate agenda and the sustainable development agenda?
Well, I think, there is a 5-point agenda, if I may put that. First is very importantly integrating environment, social governance parameters into lending decisions, because that is going to get the capital into the right place and would not be affected by any kind of changes or any kind of impacts from a regulatory standpoint, or from a social or an environmental negative impact standpoint, right? So that's the first one. Second one is innovating for the bottom of the pyramid. I mean, if you look at India as a country, the bottom of the pyramid is large, and therefore, how do you actually serve that sector, that particular contingent, with access to finance, the first one. So, fintech, that is the financial technology, is becoming very, very useful here. And we've recently launched a product so there are 900 million cell phone users in India, out of which 400 million are mobile. They're mobile phone users, not the feature phones, the smartphone users, sorry. 150 have access to internet. So the rest don't have access to internet. So we actually worked with a Taiwanese company on a slim sleeve. It is a sleeve that fits onto your SIM card of any service provider and enables internet for mobile banking. So we believe that there is a 700 million target kind of a market there, and these kind of technologies really help to tap that market and go rural and the reach that comes, because India is a large country. So the reach that is brought out by financial technologies, I think that is very, very important. So that's my second point. Third one is going behind proactive markets like renewable energy, positive impact sectors. So green bonds that we issued in 2015, we were the first bank in India to issue green bonds, and we got a very successful bond out there with good, very strong investor demand, and 160 million US dollars was the total issuance, where proceeds will go to solar and wind. So I think these are extremely important from achieving the commitments, So capacity building is very, very important. So how do you actually build in climate literacy? That is a very, very important element, and we work towards that through policy advocacy, through education, awareness for investors particularly, because why would investors look at green? I mean, investors are conventionally tuned to look at the price that is ultimately the return on the investment, right? So that is a very important element, I believe.
And India has some very ambitious renewable energy goals, but also some quite ambitious plans for building new coal power plants. And there's a tension, isn't there, between a lot of Western countries or Western banks are kind of turning away from coal, see it as more risky now that we have these global climate targets, and coal obviously being a more polluting fuel. How do you see that as a bank? Because obviously there are development needs and there are also environmental needs that you need to balance. But how do you manage that risk?
So my answer to this would be that in a growing economy like India, coal is a reality, and India is really looking to balance exponential growth with sustainable consumption. Having said that, what is very important is the focus on clean technology for coal. So how do you look at financing the clean technology for coal would be very important for the financial sector here, as far as India is concerned. And what we've seen is more and more renewable energy. Finance is being diverted more and more towards renewable energy, and the demand for coal-generated power will diminish going forward. So one is, of course, it will be. So while foreign investments will not come, I mean, there are foreign investors who do not look at coal at all anymore, but the Indian requirement would be financed internally. However, there is a hard competition to coal from renewable energy, and that is where the sector is really moving towards. So if you look at the entire production of power in India, which is about 195 gigawatts, there is almost about a 15% increase year on year as far as renewable energy is concerned. And today renewable energy is almost at about 45 gigawatts of generation. So I believe that while it is a reality that one has to tackle, coal technology financing would be, clean technology financing would really bring in. So, I'm happy to meet some of the companies here which look at carbon capture and how do you actually, we worked with a company in 2012 where it was an Australian company that we got into India, where the calorific value of the coal is reduced. So it's a clean coal technology. So I think that's the focus area for India maybe.
Okay, and just finally, what support would you like to see from the Indian government or from the international community or from institutions like the World Bank to really, what would make a difference and really help you to push this green agenda in India?
I think, there is a need for multi-actor participation and action today with the kind of demand on finance that is there. And here the governments or the development banks play a large role in terms of supporting mainstream finance. So, two clear areas are guarantees against risks and credit enhancements would be very, very useful. In a country like India, where hedging costs are very high, due to exchange volatilities and currency depreciation, I think certain carve-outs by developmental banks or by the regulator or the government to basically meet the hedging costs would be very useful in sourcing cheaper capital from across the border. So that is, I think, where the action needs to be from development banks or the government.